Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Welcome to Nutrition Made Simple. This presentation is designed to simplify nutrition in order to make healthy eating as easy as possible. I know that food service workers are in high demand. You don't have a lot of time and energy to make meals. And believe it or not, even though I'm not a food service worker, I can relate. I was a professional triathlete for 7 years. And as you can imagine, my life was pretty busy. And so I will share some of my overlap and how I can relate to you in that aspect. Also, as a registered dietitian, nutrition and health is at the forefront of my mind always. And my mission is to help make it as simple as possible for clients to help build consistency. Since I was a former triathlete, I know what it takes to think on the fly, always be prepared, and to build simple meals and snacks. So I would like to share that with you. And today, you're going to hear a theme about simplicity and ease when we go through nutrition. And I think this photo on the screen captures exactly that. This was a picnic that I had with a girlfriend where you can see that color, flavor, variety, and simplicity, including all of the food groups, was the name of the game there. So the first thing I'd like to cover is my only disclosure is that I'm a partner with Dairy West, which is a regional agency representing dairy farm families in Idaho and Utah. So just a quick background about me. You can see in this photo here that during my professional triathlon days, I was always on the go. I think this photo really embodies what my life was like. And so I understand what it means to put together healthful meals. I was constantly thinking about how best to fuel my body for performance and health, but I had to keep it doable and simple so that I wasn't overwhelmed with too much to try and curate these perfect meals while I had such a demanding schedule between triathlon, work, and life. You can see here that I love to eat. I love the enjoyment of food. And I really think that this is an important concept we need to talk about when we discuss nutrition and building meals and snacks. So we will talk about the importance of enjoying your food as well. And then you can see an example here of one of my approaches to nutrition. We'll talk a little more about this in the presentation, but there's color, there's a fruit or vegetable involved, there's protein, carbs. It's pretty much just a very simple way of putting it all together. And this is one of my favorite breakfasts. And just a note, I don't always plate my breakfasts and put a cute little garnish on them. This was specifically for a social media campaign that I was doing, just to let you know that. So first, I'd like to talk about nutrition messaging. You know, whenever we have a conversation about meal planning or, the right snacks or health and nutrition in general, we have to consider what we are told from media, from practitioners, from, overall recommendations about nutrition. So the first thing that I hear a lot is you need to make everything from scratch. You need to know how to put together meals, using all the specific ingredients. And honestly, if I had to do that with all of my meals, I would not have time for much else. And you all probably understand that as well. The fact that you are spending your days putting together meals for schools, you probably can really appreciate how much time it would take to make everything from scratch. So that's the first thing I want to address here is that we are going to talk about ideas where you can leverage convenience foods that don't have to be made from scratch. So cutting corners is allowed and in fact encouraged for good nutrition. We're also told that we need to scrutinize labels in order to do it just right. And first of all, there is no perfect way of eating. There's no perfect diet. And so it's really important for people to recognize there are lots of ways to eat a nourishing, healthful meal pattern. Now, it's important to read labels to be aware of what's in your food. So, for example, if you have diabetes, you might be counting carbohydrates. If you have been told to eat less sodium, you might be looking at sodium on certain labels. You might be allergic to certain ingredients, and so be reading labels for that. Those are all fine. Just don't get too bogged down in the details if you don't need to. Keep it simple. Look for foods that are familiar and be aware of what's in your food without making it too complicated. So, special ingredients, I mean, it's great to experiment in the kitchen and it's great to try new things. Again, don't make it too complicated and don't think that you have to add exotic herbs or spices or flavors. Sometimes we hear about all of these very obscure kinds of cooking techniques or ingredients, and it can be really intimidating for someone who just really knows the basics about cooking and eating. So, stick to what you know. Maybe experiment if you're feeling confident and if you're curious and you have the time and the energy to do so. But sometimes it can be really intimidating to look at a recipe and see a list of ingredients you don't even recognize, you don't know where to find them in the store. That can be a real barrier to just basic healthy eating. I also want to talk about meal prep. So, we're obsessed with meal prep right now. If you are on Pinterest or Instagram or, sometimes on Facebook you see it. We see these influencers that have these perfectly curated meals that are, maybe in a little bento box or little to-go containers, and they're colorful and they're perfect. Oh my gosh, that takes a lot of time. And one thing I'd like to make clear is when I was growing up, meal prep was called leftovers. So that's all it is. We are preparing food and then we're sticking it in the fridge for later. You might reheat it, you might eat it cold, you might reinvent it in a different way. Just again, don't let yourself get so overwhelmed with these ideas of meal prep and what it should look like. Quote, should look like, because you ultimately are in charge of that. And leftovers are just fine. I'm giving you full permission to just have leftover food. We also have diet industry buzzwords that cause a lot of confusion. So we might hear things like plant based. Well, guess what? We're going to talk about the food groups here in a little bit. And the basics of nutrition truly are plant based nutrition. We have been hearing this message for a long time. It's just been repackaged into more of a new concept that's, shiny and glittery and enticing for people. But really, following basic nutrition guidance like my plate is plant based. We might hear buzzwords like eating clean or guilt free or superfoods. We might see special diets like paleo or keto. Again, don't complicate it. Don't let yourself get kind of sucked into this exact right way of eating or these rules that you need to follow, because really, nutrition should be simple and it should be doable for you. So, our theme for the day is simplicity and ease. Okay. We want to make nutrition simple and easy. And there's a saying in the industry that nutrition is simple, but it isn't easy. So, let's take a closer look at these two terms and really get clear on definitions so that we can move forward with food planning and meal planning in a simple and easy fashion. So I did actually take these definitions from Merriam-Webster because I just think it's really important to get granular on this and have a few reminders as you're going through your day and as you're meal planning so that you can make informed decisions and stick with the simple and easy approach. So looking at simple, simple means not hard to understand or do, having few parts, not complex or fancy. So remember, the ingredients can be simple. It can be something you know. It doesn't take a lot of energy or thought for you to get into this. Not special or unusual, ordinary. Man, that is not the messaging we really get for healthy nutrition these days. Ordinary foods can be perfectly healthful. In fact, I think the simpler the better with a lot of nutrition concepts. So not only does it take pressure off of you to put together some, fancy exotic meal with special ingredients, but it also really encourages consistency in your eating to just keep it ordinary. Now, easy might sound like kind of the same thing as simple, but there's a few words here that I think are really powerful. So, causing or involving little difficulty or discomfort. And I love that word discomfort because we don't really think of meal planning as being uncomfortable. But if you think about the expectation and the pressure that a lot of people put on themselves to put together a, proper dinner for their family or to think ahead for a full week of meals, man, that can be an uncomfortable place. Or on the flip side, if you didn't have the time or energy to put together what you might expect to be the perfect eating pattern, there could be some guilt associated with that, or frustration or disappointment in yourself. And those are uncomfortable feelings. And so easy really takes away some of that discomfort and makes it more doable for you. Also, requiring or indicating little thought, reflection, or effort. I think effort is really the key word here because, again, we tend to think of healthy eating as really taking a ton of time and effort. And I'm going to show you some ways today that you can take away that extra effort and pressure and make it a lot easier on yourself. And then readily available. So make the healthy choice the easy choice. How can we leverage convenience, maybe some processing, which we'll talk about a little later as well? How can we make it so readily available that you can grab good nutrition and feel confident about the choices that you're making in your food world? Okay, so let's start with simplifying food. I have a few examples here of how to approach meal planning and snack planning with simplicity. So, the first thing is to start with foods you know. You can see on the slide here, that is a very simple meal of scrambled eggs with some spinach and a piece of sourdough toast. Again, super familiar foods. I think everybody probably knew these foods by the time they were in grade school. You don't have to make it super complicated or have all of these new foods. Stick with something you know. You can always build on it and modify later. So remember, simplicity means having few parts. So I mentioned my plate before. This is actually a very sound approach to simple nutrition. You can see the 5 main food groups. Obviously, with food service and school lunches, we like to put all of the food groups into play and make them all options. But I realize that isn't always the case with our home meals and home cooking. You don't always have all 5 food groups available. So let's simplify it even further. Aim for at least 3 food groups for a meal, just 3. You can have more if you want, but if you just get those 3, you're looking at a pretty balanced meal. Also, make sure you have a fruit or vegetable with that meal. So that could be one of your 3 food groups. The reason I say that is because we often hear, eat more fruits and vegetables, get extra veggies. We know that the recommendation is 5 or 7 servings of fruit or vegetables every day. Well, think about it. If you have, 3 meals and maybe 2 snacks in a day, that's 5 eating opportunities. And if you include a fruit or vegetable every time you eat, then you're going to be hitting that recommendation. It really, if I were to tell somebody, eat your 5 to 7 fruits or vegetables every day, it might sound really overwhelming. And how do I even begin? How do I do that? But if you simplify it down into, okay, I need to pick some food groups, I need to make sure I have a fruit or vegetable, it becomes a lot more doable. And then for snacks, if you're hungry in between meals, snacking is not necessary for everybody. I want to just say that first of all. But it's also very common, especially for people that are on the go, or if you have an active job like in food service, you might need a little bit of nourishment between your main meals, especially if that meal is going to be delayed a little while. So, looking at the food groups, pick at least 2 food groups for your snack and include a fruit or vegetable. Okay, now the final piece of simplicity is to think about, at least I have 7 on this slide as the number to think about, but you could think of more, or if you can only come up with 5, that's okay too. But just really try and think about, what are some meals that I can make in my sleep that I know how to make? I know how much time it takes. I can keep the ingredients on hand. Think of some things. And as we go through the next several slides, I invite you to jot down ideas as we're going through this. Maybe it's an idea that I present in my presentation. Maybe it's an idea that pops in your head that you're like, oh yeah, I know how to make that recipe like any day of the week, and I enjoy eating it. That is really key to starting to build a predictable meal plan. And again, keeping nutrition really simple. Now, as you go through that list, say you come up with your 7 very simple meals. And I just want to say that picture that you just saw on the screen with the salmon, let me see if I can, there we go. This is one of my simple meals. A salmon fillet, it could be fresh or frozen. I season it, I put some lemon juice on it, throw it in the oven at 400. It's usually ready in 15 to 20 minutes while I'm doing something else. I could stir fry vegetables, I could steam broccoli in the microwave, I could cook some rice on the stove. Again, putting together these food group components in a way that is super easy and doable for you. Now, can those recipes be modified? So maybe you already know how to make like pasta and chicken with red sauce, but you don't really have a strong vegetable component. And so can you add a veggie to that meal and make it really well-rounded and keep it simple? What about making in bulk for leftovers or, meal prep? What if you can, make a little extra, like double the recipe for the taco seasoning, taco meat that you're going to make for taco night? Maybe you make an extra large pot of chili that you can freeze some of that for later. So again, thinking of the things you already know, let's apply that information and let's see if we can leverage some of that to make further meals easier for you further down the week. Okay, so let's talk a little more about easy. So remember, easy means little difficulty and readily available. So I'm going to start with proteins because I think that protein foods tend to be one of the most challenging for people. They take some thought. You might have to thaw them out. You might have to season them or marinate them. They might take longer to cook. So let's talk about ways to make this easy. One of my top choices is to get frozen protein options, especially when it comes to something like fish or seafood. A lot of times, if you get the frozen items, you can just keep those in your freezer for a quick protein option. Yes, you have to thaw them out sometimes, but something like shrimp, I mean, I can run that under cold water for 10 minutes and it's thawed out and ready to cook. So keep in mind some of the frozen options that you can leverage as you're putting your meals together. Canned is just as good. So when we think of canned proteins, of course, canned beans are a great option, but also canned meats. I mean, tuna, chicken, salmon. Some of you might even be into like Spam or Vienna sausages. There's lots of different options. This is important to keep on hand so that you have those options when you didn't have time to get to the grocery store, didn't think to thaw something out in the freezer. You don't have time to actually like wait for the cooking. You've got to make dinner now. Canned chicken can come together really nicely in a pasta sauce or can be thrown into a salad. You can make burgers really quickly with canned salmon with egg and a little bit of spices and breadcrumbs. Patty that together and then cook it up in a pan. Again, lots of different options there. Don't forget that your grocery deli and your neighborhood market might have pre-marinated meats or pre-cooked meats. So keep those options in mind as well. Moving on to vegetables, which I think is probably one of the hardest food groups as well for people because, with fruit, you can just eat the fruit out of your hand. You don't necessarily have to peel it or cook it or prepare it somehow. Vegetables, on the other hand, you usually have to do some kind of prep to make the vegetable edible. So again, canned and frozen options are fantastic. And they do have strong nutritional value. Remember that it's only nutrition if you eat it. So it does you no good to go and buy all these fresh vegetables and then not have time to make them. And then they go bad in your refrigerator. You didn't get that nutrition. It would be much better to have canned or frozen options that are not going to go bad, but you can use them as the week or the month goes on. Look for options in your produce section that are already processed in some way. And I'm using that term intentionally because a lot of times we hear the word processed in today's jargon and it has a negative connotation, but processing can really help you put nutritious meals on the table in short order. So look for chopped veggies, look for peeled or spiralized vegetables, look for bagged salads or chopped lettuce or baby spinach that's already pre-washed. All of these options, broccoli florets, cauliflower florets, something that makes it really easy. All of these options have a bit of processing that goes into them. And we'll talk a little more about the cost and convenience balance on the next slide. But just think outside the box a little bit. Like, how can I make some of these options really easy for me? But, still maintain a really good nutritional balance and get those three food groups in. Now, as we look at starches, I'm not going to go too in depth on these because I think starches are a little bit easier for people to incorporate into their eating plans. But minute brown rice, pasta only takes about 8 minutes to cook. You could try a whole wheat version, or they have some great bean and lentil versions. Potatoes boil up really easily, or I might, toss them in oil and roast them in the oven while I'm preparing the rest of my meal. Maybe takes like 20, 30 minutes, depending on, the potato. Canned corn, beans, peas. Again, you can have starches and you can have extra fiber with those. Canned doesn't go bad, so you don't have to worry about that. And then boxed whole grain mixes like a quinoa or a couscous mix. Again, lots of different ways that you can cut corners and make food convenient and delicious. So I'm sharing this picture of a shopping cart that this is an actual shopping cart for me during one of my triathlon training camps when I was a pro. And you can see some of the items in here that are convenience items. I have a rotisserie chicken. You can't see it, but in the bottom there, I have some bagged salad mixes. I have canned beans. I have pre-sliced cheese, some of the pre-washed vegetables that are ready to go. Again, looking for some of those ways that I know I can cut corners. So look at convenience versus cost. We know that foods that are prepared a little bit and have been under some processing cost a little bit more, but that cost could be offset with getting the nutrition in your body. It could set you up for better health and even more happiness if you don't have to spend as much time preparing food. Better consistency with eating, and can build confidence from that consistency. So keep in mind that processing can actually be a good thing. It's not always a bad thing. And that extra cost for that convenience could actually set you up for the better. So it's important to get organized when you're putting this together. I think it's really critical to look ahead at your week and anticipate what you might need in order to put good nutrition into play. Do you have long work days, or do you have kind of a wonky work schedule where you have to be at work early or you might have to stay late? Do you have family obligations? Maybe you got, kids soccer practice or something in the evening and that's going to interfere with dinner. Look at any weekly patterns that might be emerging in your eating plan. So I see this a lot with families when they, might do well Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They have all this meal planned out, but then by the time Thursday, Friday, and into the weekend hits, you have run out of food, or food has gone bad, or you didn't have enough time to prepare some of the other things, or something comes up. So really look at, man, does my week just fall apart by Thursday? Take a little bit of time when you have the time and you're not under pressure to just think about your week ahead and how do I make this simple and easy on myself? And then when can you get groceries? Again, this is a convenience versus cost conversation. Maybe having groceries delivered is a worthwhile investment for you. Maybe it doesn't have to happen every week, but maybe it needs to happen like at the beginning of the month. You have a particularly heavy schedule, or somebody gets sick and you have to go cover their shift and you don't have time to go get groceries. Maybe it's worth your while to invest in just a little extra. A lot of grocery stores have drive up and go. So you can just order, on your phone or on your computer, and then you drive and pick it up. So think about, again, those ways that you can plan ahead and just be prepared. And I love this quote: if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Just a little bit of planning and organization really does go a long way in implementing a solid nutrition plan. So let's talk about ways that you can put this all together. For food groups for meals, again, we're looking at 3 food groups and including a fruit or vegetable every time. So some examples here would be a rotisserie chicken with a bagged salad and some whole grain crackers, or a whole grain roll, or a piece of toast. I mean, again, really doesn't have to be complicated. You're utilizing some of those convenience foods that already have some of the work done for you. And this can make leftovers for lunches and dinners later in the week. Chickpea curry using canned beans or prepared sauce and roasted veggies. This is one of my favorites. This picture on your slide is actually chickpea masala. So I think it has like 4 ingredients in it. I use canned garbanzo beans, comes together really easily. And I just take the cauliflower florets and pop them in the oven to roast while I'm making the masala on the stove. This meal comes together in about 15 minutes. Again, very easy, and it hits those main food groups. And then frozen stir fry with a prepared sauce and beef strips. Now, you can look in your fresh meats department and see if they already do some of, and most meat counters will actually do some of the slicing for you. You just ask them, hey, can I get some chicken breasts that are sliced for stir fry or something like that? And they'll usually do it for you. So leverage that kind of service. Frozen veggies, again, the preparation is kind of done. You just throw them in the pan. And then sometimes I get a lot of pushback on using like jarred sauces or anything that, simmer sauces or mixes or anything like that. Well, yes, they tend to have more sodium in them. A lot of people deem them as maybe not as healthy. However, again, it's only nutrition if you eat it. So if having a jarred stir fry sauce helps you get some veggies and protein and whole grain and a good solid meal in your rotation, then I would say that's a pretty good trade-off from a health standpoint and for just a sheer convenience standpoint. So then when we look at snacking, again, 2 food groups include a fruit or vegetable. So I have this example here on the slide, cottage cheese and pear. This is one of my favorites. Easily transportable. It's very satisfying for me. It has a little sweet and salty combination. I choose 2 food groups to put together because nutrition is symbiotic, meaning the nutrition in the fruit actually complements the nutrition in the cottage cheese. So it's a much more powerful snacking choice than just grabbing a handful of one food item and eating that for your snack. Some other combinations you see here are tuna salad on cucumber slices or whole grain crackers, or almonds and a couple cuties. You could choose any combination of nuts or a little bit of trail mix and then a fresh fruit. Again, lots of different ways to do this. Just think of ways that you can put generally a protein plus a fruit or vegetable item together. And think of ways that you can have snacks on the go. Now, some people say you have to snack to be healthy. I think that it's really important to listen to your hunger and decide if a snack is right for you. Sometimes you have a shift that will run longer. So maybe lunch or dinner is pushed later. That might be a great time to be prepared with a snack. If you don't have access to refrigeration, you might carry, a bar with an apple around with you, or you might take, some nuts or trail mix with a couple cuties and be ready that way. Again, it's thinking ahead. It's being prepared. If you do need the snack, at least you have a good option on the ready. Okay, now it's your turn to, if you haven't already written down any ideas through this presentation, I invite you to do that right now. So we've just got a couple minutes left here. I really want you to think of 2 quick, healthy meals using the information that we talked about today that you know how to make, that are almost brainless for you to put together. I want you to write at least 2 of them down right now. So you have a couple things to kind of get that inspiration going and to choose from. Ideally, you'll continue this list and develop 7, 10, maybe 14 different dinner ideas or quick meals that you can put together. Next, I want you to do the same thing with snacks using the ideas we talked about. So couple food groups, include a fruit or vegetable with every snack. Think of, different combinations, things that might need to be refrigerated, things that don't need to be refrigerated, that could be carried with you, just in your bag or your purse. Remember, nutrition can be simple and easy. Those are the 2 things. We don't want a lot of effort. We don't want it to be too complicated, because that will help you breed consistency, and consistency leads to good health. Don't forget, it's important for it to be tasty. So we want you to enjoy your food, look for different flavors, varieties of textures, and make sure that it tastes good, because you're much more likely to eat it. And nutrition is only nutrition if you eat it. Don't forget 3 food groups for a meal, 2 food groups for a snack, and include a fruit or vegetable every time you eat. Thank you.